My dad quit his job to pursue his dream in archaeology. His career is now in ruins. Today, I'm going to recap a 2014 crime thriller film called John Doe, Vigilante. The film opens with the character of Ken Rutherford, a probing news reporter intent on delving into the hidden storyline of an enigmatic murderer in their locality. The unidentified murderer has a distinct pattern. His victims are invariably deceitful public servants or rotten royals. The numerous executions committed by this mysterious figure are heavily reported across television networks. Nevertheless, given the absence of clarity around the murderer's identity, he's frequently dubbed as John Doe. John Doe continues his habitual practice of putting to death any immoral leader or individual who is often protected by flawed legislation. He arrives at the dwelling of a cleric, known as Xavier Edward, who, upon revelation, is a sexual predator targeting a young girl named Sally in seclusion. John Doe forcefully intrudes and instructs Sally to evacuate in order to swiftly pass judgment and carry out his execution on Pastor Xavier. He directs Xavier to a chamber where he has accumulated photographic evidence of all his victims. In a violent act of justice, John Doe uses a steel crowbar to repeatedly strike Xavier's groin until he succumbs to his injuries. Subsequently, he collects all incriminating evidence of Xavier's heinous acts and indecency, taking it to a television broadcasting outlet. However, post-broadcasting the news of Xavier's demise, the network strategically edits and distorts all the tapes handed over by John Doe, thereby maintaining the public's ignorance of Pastor Xavier's transgressions. Astonishingly, the television station frames his death as a gruesome crime committed by someone with deep-seated animosity towards his faith. Ken, the inquisitive journalist, cognizant of the tampering in the broadcasted video, decides to visit the television station in a bid to obtain the uncensored footage of Pastor Xavier's incident. The editors rebuff his demand, instead suggesting he personally visit the police department to discover the true events. Arriving at the station, he learns that the authorities deliberately concealed Pastor Xavier's crimes, fearing that public disclosure would inevitably provoke widespread protest. The people would be incensed upon realizing their trusted priest was in reality a vile predator. Ken subsequently encounters Sam, a journalist who previously secured video records of John Doe's judgments and homicides. He uncovers that John Doe can only entrust Sam with the tapes, given his distaste for corrupt politicians and unprincipled tyrants. Ken seeks approval from the editor-in-chief to meet Sam, but he's currently on air, revealing the motivations behind John Doe's numerous murders. He states on live television that John Doe primarily targets corrupt individuals who consistently manage to evade legal consequences, thereby assuring the public that John Doe poses no threat to ordinary civilians. Upon hearing the news, John Doe remains undeterred in his mission to locate and exterminate his targets with unwavering resolve. The specific punishment dealt to each target varies, contingent on the nature and severity of their committed offenses. A deceptive bureaucrat, infamous for manipulating and exploiting the populace, would find themselves restrained with tape and stabbed in the mouth using a tube. Regular predators would be subjected to a stabbing in the posterior, while perpetrators of abuse would face the excruciating punishment of genital mutilation. Given that all his targets are highly influential wrongdoers who have managed to skillfully evade any form of legal retribution, they fall within John Doe's victim portfolio. In the cover of darkness, he approaches the residence of a man, a youth counselor by profession, who had so grievously violated two girls that they required intensive psychological rehabilitation. In this operation, John Doe opts to release evidence via social media platforms, as opposed to television networks. Consequently, video proof of all the victims' transgressions remains unedited and unaltered, thereby enlightening the public about John Doe's true intentions. Post the incident, a segment of society applauds his actions, and a young man by the name of Murray Willis confesses to having established a fan club dedicated to John Doe. Nevertheless, Murray is at odds with John Doe's vigilante methodology, choosing to support him solely due to his valor in championing justice for victims failed by the defective legal system. Several days later, a woman named Kate Johnson approaches a social service organization, seeking assistance as a survivor of domestic abuse at the hands of her husband. Her request is not to initiate legal proceedings, but rather financial aid for procuring medication from the pharmacy. Despite the abuse, she professes her love for her husband and expresses her unwillingness to separate. However, the cycle of violence continues, with her husband, under alcohol's influence, brutally assaulting her to unconsciousness before departing their residence. It's at this moment that John Doe materializes, unleashing a brutal attack on the husband until he breathes his last. Several months elapse, and the tally of homicides committed by John Doe climbs to 18, drawing an increasing amount of public attention to his deeds. While a considerable portion of society endorses him, others vocally criticize his vigilante approach, irrespective of his intentions to uphold justice. Days later, a video featuring two teenagers assaulting another boy in a nightclub goes viral across social media platforms. The victim, who slipped into a coma before succumbing to his injuries, triggers widespread outrage. However, the court acquits the two offenders, as the judge concludes their violent actions were merely in self-defense. The twist in the tale is that the acquitted boys are the sons of the nightclub owner, where the assault took place, implicating a potential scenario where the owner could have bribed the judiciary to absolve his sons of all charges. It's evident that the parents of the abused victim are engulfed in fury and a profound sense of betrayal by the system, forced to watch their child's assailant walk free, void of any punishment. In the ensuing days, John Doe tracks down one of the young perpetrators, ending his life by fastening a cyanide-laced patch around his neck, leading to convulsions and respiratory distress. John Doe's actions this time tread a precarious line, yet Ken and the police force are unable to apprehend him, as surveillance cameras fail to capture his facial identity. The chief of police conjectures that John Doe could be a former high-ranking military official, well versed in the intricacies of public safety protocols. As the count of his victims escalates over time, so too does the size of John Doe's legion of supporters. Parallelly, Murray maintains his crusade against the legal system's inefficiencies and the gross injustices that enable criminals to evade punishment. He declares that only John Doe is competent enough to mete out justice, penalizing offenders exploiting the chinks in the law's armor. Furthermore, he initiates a petition drive, aiming to pressure the government into mandating harsher penalties for vile criminals and their depraved acts. Regrettably, the Ministry of Law dismisses the petition, reasoning that any petition lacking governmental funding or endorsement wouldn't warrant serious consideration. Following this setback, a group of young men from the John Doe support community pledged to emulate John Doe's modus operandi, pronouncing judgment and executing law evaders. Under the cover of darkness, they lure a young offender to a location, plotting his execution. Subsequently, they start abducting corrupt officials, subjecting them to torture within a clandestine headquarters. The incident gains widespread television coverage, and the speculations are rife that Murray might be the mastermind orchestrating the support group's abductions. Despite this, he staunchly denies any involvement, given his firm stance against vigilante justice. Sam, too, falls under the spotlight of suspicion, given his perceived support for the fanatical group, primarily due to his recent lack of coverage of the group's activities. Sam concedes that his decision to avoid reporting on the group was intentional, driven by his support for John Doe. He expresses his frustration with individuals who continue to comply with corrupt authorities, neglecting the pursuit of justice for victims of crime. In a dramatic twist, John Doe suddenly commandeers a television broadcast, showcasing the execution of an older predator. This target is dissimilar from the previous ones. The man in question is impoverished with no legal representation. John Doe interrogates Adam, intermittently assaulting him. Adam protests his innocence, denying any predatory behavior. Upon hearing this, John Doe retrieves a wooden box, revealing the pigtails of children who were victims of Adam's brutal abuse and subsequent murders. Despite the damning evidence presented by John Doe, Adam staunchly refutes all the allegations, maintaining his innocence. John Doe nods in apparent acceptance of Adam's protest. Adam, still shackled, attempts to yell for help, hoping someone would hear and rescue him. However, John Doe coldly informs him that no rescue can come in their secluded location. As tempers flare, John Doe resolves to unmask himself, letting Adam see the face of his captor. When Adam finally beholds the man before him, his shouts die down and terror overtakes him, for he recognizes John Doe. It is revealed that John Doe is the father of a young girl, who fell prey to Adam's deplorable act. Since Adam's heinous crime, John Doe's once peaceful and contented family life had spiraled into ruin. He declares his initial plan was to render Adam paralyzed as a form of retribution. Yet in this country, those with disabilities receive governmental assistance, which would inadvertently make Adam's life more comfortable. Therefore, he decides to shift his goal and aims to end Adam's life, as he had done with previous wrongdoers. Despite his relentless pursuit of justice, John Doe grows weary of his role as judge and executioner, choosing to offer Adam one final opportunity for confession as he levels a gun at him. Adam, seemingly on the brink of madness, asserts he harbors no regrets for his misdeeds, even deriving pleasure from his atrocities. This proclamation incites fury within John Doe, who then shoots Adam dead. Subsequently, John Doe willingly exposes his location on the broadcast before cutting it off, allowing the authorities to pinpoint and arrest him. Upon their arrest and subsequent interrogation, they learn that he is a former high-ranking military official who previously served in governmental security. Prior to the court proceedings, Ken arranges to meet him, desiring an interview about his series of actions. Ken had been curious about how John Doe selected his victims for punishment or execution. John Doe confesses that he was privy to such information as he worked in a social services institution, where he regularly received complaints from victims. Upon hearing this, Ken concludes that John Doe is nothing more than a murderer who used his defense of victims to justify his homicidal actions. This accusation ignites John Doe's fury, and he quickly turns to the camera, urging the general public to muster the courage to fight for justice and prevent corrupt officials from ruling them. Then John Doe feigns a suicide attempt, causing the police officers and Ken to spring into action. However, it was merely a ruse for John Doe to get close to Ken and kill him, as it turns out Ken was another predator, notorious for preying on young boys. Several days later, John Doe's court proceedings commence, drawing extensive coverage from multiple media outlets eager to hear the court's verdict on his punishment. As the court spokesperson is preparing to announce the judge's decision, a multitude of supporters sympathetic to John Doe's cause appear and instigate chaos by detonating several explosives around the courthouse perimeter. They utilize helicopters to engage and distract the courthouse security personnel and police officers, sparking pandemonium. Amidst the ensuing disarray, Sam and Murray remain eerily composed, almost as if they were privy to the impending chaos. Exploiting the pandemonium, John Doe's devoted followers manage to rescue him, successfully whisking him away from the courthouse. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.